everybody. This is Brittany Perkins, or Britt Perkins. Wait a minute, let me adjust my mic because I'm sounding real sultry right now. And that's because, as you know, I'm still kind of sick. I have been sick for 42 years. No, man, turns out like I'm terribly allergic to dust. I mean, the fuck? What am I supposed to do about that? So right now they have me taking all of these like ridiculous medicines. I got to vacuum every morning. You know what I mean? Like it's up and down. So my next option is probably going to be a sinus surgery, which I'm not really looking forward to that. Don't really want to do that. My aunt just had that surgery. She had a couple of complications with spinal fluid. So, that's not looking great, but as far as my sinuses are concerned, it seems like my sinuses are just it's just like a hedge maze. Like when we looked at the CT scan, there's just all types of just zigzags and shit up in there. I got like, somehow I have like a piece of a tooth jammed up in my sinus. Don't know how that happened. It probably happened with an old root canal or some shit. I don't really fucking know, but this is why I drink, you know. But today, and thank you for coming. This is Swear to Drunk I'm Not God. And this morning we have a special episode because this is actually, I swear to God, I'm not drunk. I'm not drinking this episode, y'all. And I'm telling you why. Because your girl drinks whether I'm on this show or not. And the heartburn today has just been boom, boom, boom. You know what I mean? The heartburn has been just up, down, up, down, up, down, burn, up, down, up, down, up, down, burn. This period that I'm going through right now, where I'm just like emotionally and physically exhausted, I'm trying to let that energy run its course. You know what I'm saying? Like, I haven't worked out in a week. My body's been tired. I hope you all had a wonderful Christmas. I spent a great deal of that first week doing an obscene amount of shopping. I think we went to every mall. Me and my mother went, and my sister honestly went to every mall in Illinois and in the surrounding states. I am fucking exhausted. Then I hit a roadblock right after Christmas. I have one of those issues where I get post-holiday melancholia where I'm just like depressed as fuck after Christmas. It's like being on a roller coaster. You hit the peak, it drops, and you're like, oh, this is it. Then the rest of the roller coaster is lackluster. That's the only way I can actually describe those things. But you know, my mom was with me. I spent all Christmas with her. She lives in a whole other state, so I devoted most of my time to her, and I also was able to shed back a few of those layers, those COVID fears my mom has. My mom has been very COVID strict, but as she got here and she got around us and she got around other people, because she's out there in LA basically by herself, she opened up. I was like, okay, we're in the car. Okay, you don't have on your mask. Okay. You know, it was like baby steps, but she did good. She did very good. She did very, very, very good. I ended up having like a little Christmas gathering and we opened gifts. It was just great. It was, you know, it's the most wonderful time of the year. I told you, I fucking love Christmas. But that post-holiday melancholia, oh, it hit me hard. I was down for almost 72 hours of just like, it was depression because I couldn't talk, you know, like I just couldn't make my mouth say words. And I've been in that space before. So, you know, to all my friends who are listening that tried to check up on me and I just completely ignored, it was definitely not on purpose. I'm just trying to set those boundaries. I couldn't even get my fingers to respond to text half the time unless I felt it was like, oh, I should probably answer this. You know what I mean? So, you know, my friends care about me and I'm pretty fucking strong, but this last quarter of this year has just, it has brought up some old shit and there's some new shit baked right on top of it. And it's just been a lot. And I'm one of those people, I don't emote the way a lot of people naturally do. So when I feel like, oh, I need to cry or things like that's a process. Like I need to set up the moment to go cry. Like I need to go run the water. I need to do all my shit, and then I need to go sit in the bathtub and cry. And then once I get out of that bathtub, the crying needs to be done. I'm fucking weird and type A like that. But recently I've really, really been trying to focus on my emotional health instead of just my physical health. I work out so fucking much and then my brain is in shambles. So, this has been, a very, very interesting week. And my therapist told me if I needed to just scream into a pillow, then I should do that. But, it was harder to do because my mom was here and I was so trying to balance not tanking everybody else's mood, in a way I can be a people pleaser. So, my whole thing was I'm not gonna fuck up my family's experience. I'm particularly not gonna fuck up my mom's vacation when she really hasn't seen us in 3 years. And, she has completely secluded herself from the rest of the world since COVID. So I had to balance those two things. I had to figure out a way to feel and figure out how to entertain. I guess people do that all the time. So I'm just learning how to do it in my way. Now, boom. Like I said, this is I Swear to Drunk I'm Not God. But today we are I Swear to God I'm Not Drunk. And that is due to my heartburn. And but I did put together a little video for you all, and it is for the Lavender Gimlet, my favorite. You're probably like, Brittany, what the fuck? You're not doing anything complicated. I'm not a mixologist, bro. I'm not a mixologist. I'm just here to provide you a cocktail that will get you drunk. Okay. If I find something cool, then I'm gonna inject that. Otherwise you drinking what the fuck I drink. I'm sorry. I'm aggressive. I just spent the whole week researching Eazy-E. So what you're drinking, the Lavender Gimlet. It is lavender syrup. If you have it, go somewhere and buy you some lavender syrup. Just have it on your bar. Just have it because it's wonderful. If you don't have lavender syrup, if you think it's too sweet, get you a lavender bitter and then add you a little simple syrup to it and some lime juice and some gin. You put that shit in the glass. You shake that shit up, or in a shaker. You shake that shit up until it's chill. You pour it over some soda water. I like to just do my tonics. I don't typically do soda waters, but I know people try to watch their tonic use because of quinine. Look, get it, sugar. It's a problem. It's literally cocaine. But for me, I always prefer a Fevertree Elderflower or a Premium Indian Tonic. Fevertree is my shit. I will always buy Fevertree, but I will also say that Q is the bomb, and Costco currently has a fucking box of 24 cans of Q tonic. Go get it. It's like $24. I'm like, these are $1 a piece. These are usually like in a 4-pack. So, if you're a tonic, I bought 2 boxes of that shit. So if you're a tonic drinker, like I'm a tonic drinker, I would suggest going to Costco. And everybody, go get a fucking membership at Costco. It's $50 a year. Stop acting stupid. The gas is cheap. Excuse me. I'm going to sip. What I'm sipping is flat out cranberry juice. So I'm sorry. I have to consider my health in this particular moment. Now, who are we talking about today? I already told you. We are talking about the one and only Godfather of Gangsta rap, motherfucking Eazy-E. Eric Wright. Now, you're like, Brittany, I'm confused. Yeah, I know. Here's the thing. Me and my mom, okay, there's a story. I already used 10 minutes. I'm going to use another 10. Fuck it. So my mom is a huge West Coast rap fan. I grew up with both sides. My mother was a West Coast rap fan, and my uncle was an East Coast rap fan. So he was big into Method Man and Wu-Tang and just all the East Coast sounds in the 90s, 80s and 90s. My mother was into Pac, Eazy-E, N.W.A, Ice Cube, Dr. Dre. So I kind of lived with the best of both worlds. And I consider myself to have a pretty strong and solid, so fuck everybody, pretty good hip hop ear. Like, I love fucking music. Right now, everybody who knows me knows that I'm in love with Griselda. I listen to as much Griselda as humanly possible. I got my thing from YouTube. You know how they do like oh, this is 2022. What have you been listening to? And there's an artist under BSF. I think it's Benny the Butcher's. He's Bodie James. I've been listening to his Kill Nothing album so much that they literally was like, this is all you listen to. I was like, wait a minute. I know I've listened to more music than that. And if I'm not mistaken, that album came out this year. So, but I'm loyal. So when I like a group, I want to listen to everything. So, and I even buy the merch. Like I just bought West Side's Gun, $150 fucking Elizabeth Taylor sweatshirt. Obsessed. I'll post a picture of that because it is beautiful. Anyway, so I grew up with these two worlds, right? And so my mother, though, always loved Eazy-E. I've also learned that my mom has a type. Like there's a certain, she used to like the light-skinned, very pretty looking boys. I was like, oh, but she didn't find Eazy-E attractive at all. So at first I was like, you only like Eazy-E because of how he look. And I thought he was kind of adorable, but like an adorable, like a little brother way, because we're both taller than him. So excuse me, we're both taller than him. So, but he had this song, called We Want Easy. And there's a verse. I'm gonna rap it. Watch. Wait. It's called We Want Easy. It's on his early Easy Does It album. This is the verse that my mom always raps. It goes a little something like this. A miracle of modern creation. Eazy-E's on the set, hyped up with the bass and a little bit of what you love from a brother who's smooth like a criminal. I mean subliminal, otherwise known as a villain, because I'm ruthless. When I spot a sucker, I kill him. But most I think know not to deal with me. Yo, it's obvious. Tell them who they came to see. Easy. That's my mom's shit. And when we were motherfucking in the car. We were heading to one of the malls. I don't know, Schaumburg, Woodfield, I don't know. And so I was telling her that, because she decided one night while we were here, she's like, oh, we should watch Straight Outta Compton. I was like, oh, cool. Because, you know, like I love when people come into my house and like have ideas, because I have so many movies and I never know what to watch. So she was like, oh, let's watch Straight Outta Compton. I was like, oh shit, yeah, I haven't seen that in a long time. So we're talking, vibing, listening to Straight Outta Compton, or watching Straight Outta Compton. And then they do the We Want Easy. And she, again, sings that entire, but she actually knows that whole song. She knows it from front to back. There's actually a lot of Eazy-E songs that she like remembers. Cause so while we were like on our way to the mall, she was like, play this, play Real Motherfucking G's, play blah, 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 play blah, blah, blah. So we were just like vibing out to Eazy-E. So as we were doing that, we had both already seen the mysterious death of Eazy-E. So we decided to watch it again. Now I told you, me and my mom are like really big true crime people. We love just like sitting down, talking about just like random cases or documentaries that we watch about terrible shit that happened to other people. And so we watched it and I had this thought. I was like, oh, I want to do this on the podcast. And so right before she left this morning, but yesterday, right before she left, I told her, I was like, look, I want to talk to you a little bit more about this, because she now knows about my podcast. I told her not to listen to it because I curse way too much on here and I'm still very respectful of my mom in that way. But I told her, I was like, look, I want to do Eazy-E on the podcast. And I think it'd be a cool topic, because it's not really like crime in the way that I've been doing crime, where I've been doing like serial killers and shit, but just like Mothman, I just want to do stories that are interesting. So, you know, the short synopsis of I feel like I Swear to Drunk I'm Not God is that it is a true crime podcast. But really, like I said in my intro before, it's just really all things strange, weird, you know, just like situations that make you say, huh? You know, so that's why I wanted to do Eazy-E. And I love Eazy-E. You know, I grew up listening to hard-hitting, misogynistic rap. I happen to be one of those people who does not get offended by it. I did read a couple books. And I will say, do not research your heroes, because there are things that we can all assume that rap, sometimes that they portray that is completely accurate. And then other times you're like, I don't know if you actually did this, but if you did, this is pretty fucked up, so you never really can tell. But there are aspects of N.W.A in general where I was like closing my ears, like la 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 la. Like there are aspects of Dr. Dre where we've all decided that we're just not going to pay attention to the fact that he was a fucking abuser. It's like, I told my mom, I was like, what's really fucked up is that, and it's not funny that he was abused, of course not, but I'm just saying, like, it's really funny that, like, Dr. Dre is kind of a piece of shit, and we just kind of all bump the Chronic and the Chronic 2001 like he isn't. That's number one. And number two, you motherfuckers who are out there acting like you feminists rocking them Apple products, like they didn't invest $1 billion into this man. So I'm just gonna say, I love how motherfuckers be pick and choose in they battles. I hate cancel culture, so I'm not really one to have that conversation. I do sometimes feel like you need to separate the artist from the fucked up shit that they do, especially when it involves kids. But when so it's somebody like even Dr. Dre, or even just the way Eazy-E was, and some of the stories that you hear about how they would act on the road, some of the things I think about is how young they were. This isn't a group of people who were like in their 40s and they were hitting, and a lot of rock groups at the time weren't. They were in their 20s, they were in their 30s, they were high on drugs, they were fucked up before they became rappers. So why would they stop being fucked up when they become rappers? The only person I think it was pretty balanced in N.W.A seems to have been Yella and Cube. MC Ren didn't seem so bad, even though he did seem to engage in a couple of things here and there. But Ice Cube was the one that I would say was almost saintly. he just seemed like he was a fucking saint. Even though he had his like misogynistic lyrics, and but to me it's just a story that's being told about a time and a people and a place. And sometimes when we look at things like hip hop, we dismiss things like Martin Scorsese movies, or Francis Ford Coppola. I mean, I know people don't always understand that, like, oh, you can't really compare it. Yes, we can. If we could talk about the violence and the misogyny and the terrible culture that was behind, the Italian mob, whether it was Al Capone or whether it was, Jewish people like Bugsy Siegel, or, what I mean? If we can look at all of those stories and look at them as stories, I don't see why we can't do that in rap. I think the only difference is that generally these characters are actually being represented by people who exist. I think that's the difference, but it's still a story that's being told. And I didn't grow up being censored. So, to me and my mom, and this is one thing that we discussed was, I mean, I'm not fucked up. Like, I listen to terrible, and I'm saying terrible, I mean, I listen to somewhat raunchy, offensive, misogynistic music. I will say that it has affected how I speak, and that I curse a lot. I will give it that. I think it's about parenting as well. I mean, I was a huge Eminem fan. Eminem wouldn't survive 27 seconds in 2022. But there's always that counterculture that young kids attach themselves to. And I think that it's important that parents have that conversation with them. Like, look, I'm okay that you're listening to this because these people are telling their lives, but do understand this is not your motherfucking life. And if I catch you acting like this, we're going to have a problem. I think there needs to be a conversation. So I wasn't censored in movies and I wasn't censored in music. And I think I turned out well. I think that exposure allowed me the privilege of just being able to make good, better choices, being able to hear these stories and be like, oh, I don't want no part of that. Like there is an interview, and I didn't even find this out until later. My mom was watching some random documentary on them, and Cube was like, he was being interviewed. He was like, look, I mean, we can't control, what people decide to do. And if a person you have to already have that in you to feel like, oh, this is a great time to shoot up a school because I just listened to this Marilyn Manson album. I don't do that. My mom actually, she used to work for an insurance company that was suing Acclaim, not the creators, but the developer. I guess they were the creators. I can't remember, but they did Mortal Kombat. So at the time, she was getting bombarded by all of these like claims and lawsuits from Acclaim about Mortal Kombat and what it's doing to kids. And I'm like, how is it doing anything to your kids? I played Mortal Kombat. I played Tekken. I played Grand Theft Auto, all of them. Probably not the most recent, but all of them, like from aerial view, Grand Theft Auto, like, fuck yeah, played all of them. So what are we talking about here? Like, it didn't make me want to walk around and kill prostitutes. If your child, is feeling like that game is making them do that, then you got a whole bunch of other issues. I'm sorry. There's nothing in Grand Theft Auto that I actually want to do. I don't. So I'm also a woman. I don't know. I feel like sometimes men are easily swayed. So sorry, whatever. I'm saying it. I said it. So, okay. So today we're going to talk about Eazy-E. And I hope you enjoyed that 20-minute intro because I don't usually do that. Now, sip. All right. Eric Lynn Wright was his birth name. He was born on September 7th, 1964 or 1963 in Compton, California. Now I'm saying or, and I'll tell you why I'm saying or in a minute because there's some back and forth about his birthday. And I don't think it's much back and forth to do, but me and my mom got some theories on that. So technically this episode is for me and my mom because I'm going to say that a lot. Now, so he was born in Compton to Richard and Kathy Wright. Now, his father was a postal worker. His mother was an elementary school administrator. They moved to Compton during the Great Migration. They moved from Greenville, Mississippi. And, Compton is a suburb in South Central California, South Central LA, sorry. It was at that time inadvertently left off of the county's map. So on its face, it's kind of just like one of those places that, there's land in between these other two places that we know. That's kind of how they treated South Central. But it was pleasant looking. They had palm trees. You know how I am. I'm like, when I went to that area when I lived in California, I was like, God damn, okay. It's definitely look better than where I grew up, but I can see it, I guess I can see it. But the area at the time of their moving, getting there was just working class. But then the area encountered a lot of dire economic conditions. Like after the 1965 Watts riots, people started calling it Charcoal Alley because the businesses in the area were blackened from the riot. So by the 1980s, though, Compton was in trouble. Reagan had dismantled programs to help the community stay afloat. So the poverty rate had completely increased. And we all know with poverty comes crime. So drugs and alcohol just started to infest the community. All these well-meaning families are all caught up right in the middle of it, which I've experienced growing up in West Englewood. With no prior, these people didn't really have prior knowledge of how to raise kids in that type of environment. You know what I'm saying? I think that's one important distinction is that we can say, oh, well, Compton was this and Compton was that. But yes, and their parents should have did this and their parents should have did that. Yeah, but you got to understand who these kids' parents were. You know what I mean? Like anybody born in the 60s, most likely their parents were born in the 30s or 40s. And if that's the case, they are not conditioned to raise children in a drug-infested, alcohol-infested, gang-infested environment. I'm not just saying this as an excuse, but I'm saying that I think that is something that is important to consider. I'm one of those people, you always have to look at the foundational principles. What is happening? What happened at the beginning that led to this? It's always a chain reaction, right? For every action, there's a reaction. So you can't say, this is going on, this is going on, this is going on, like it just fucking came out of the air. There was something there that led to that. And to me, just reading about N.W.A in general, even though we're doing this on Eric Wright, I will be talking about N.W.A in general, obviously. people like Ice Cube, who grew up in a 2-family home. You know, people like Suge Knight that grew up in a 2-family home. These people had the proper conditions, but I think that the parent, once the area went tanked, I think there was only a certain type of parenting that they were used to having to do. You know what I mean? And having kids being raised in these environments with these like cultish gangs, that was not one of them. So, you know, they're learning as they're going along. Most parents do. So Compton's murder rates, they go up exponentially. Gangs originally created to combat violence would become a part of the violence problem. So Compton had a murder rate that was 3 times the per capita of LA, which at the time was just 3 million. Now, according to the book I read, because I did read a couple books, I put them in the show notes. If you're interested at all in N.W.A, I definitely think you should at least read one of them. There's 2 I'm going to link that I found quotes from, but I didn't actually read. So I don't know how good that one is, but the notes that I found on it were actually pretty good. So I'm going to link that one too. But there was a quote in there where Cube said, quote, "If you sat on this porch at night and just listened real hard, you'd hear nothing but gunfire. I've heard it so much in my neighborhood that I can't hear it no more. At night, you'll see the helicopter flying around here with the spotlight on looking for somebody. If you hear a car with a beatbox booming at night, you know they're out looking for somebody. And as long as you can't see where they're coming from, gunshots aren't scary. Now, if you see the fire from the gun, then you run." So this is like you know, these people, families, especially people like Eazy-E who grew up in Compton, but whose parents grew up in Mississippi, you know, they used to a different type of fight, you know. So now Eric went to high school. He went to high school at Dominguez High School, where he dropped out in his sophomore year. Sorry, that was my stupid ass calendar. Where he dropped out his sophomore year. He would later receive his GED though, so that's good. And Compton was suffering from crack. I mean, like suffering. And this is obviously by the early 80s. Eric was known for car theft and like burglary, and he would learn the drug game in his teenage years. And eventually he got into the drug game full time, selling weed, and then he started selling crack. Now, a lot of people say that we only saw Eric sell weed. Of course, they're not going to admit that he was selling crack. Duh. But you know, he was selling weed, and just like everybody else who was making so much money at that time selling crack, he upgraded to selling crack. Okay, there's that. Street pharmacists. That's what they call them. Now, mind you, he started hustling around 12 or 13. His parents didn't seem to take issue with it, though, which is kind of weird. But, you know, it could be that they just didn't feel like they had a choice. I think that I don't know him, of course, but I think Eazy probably at a certain age was already showing signs of just like being a stronger personality. Like, I'm fucking doing it whether you tell me or not type of, you know, rebellious mentality. I mean, 13 is a good age for that. Now, his cousin, who goes by the name of Horace Butler, was murdered in 1984, and Eric had decided that he needed to get out of the game. He was like, fuck. Now, I do briefly want to go into his cousin's murder because it's pretty crazy. I mean, Horace was Eric's mentor, and he would be the one to teach him how to sell, because before he was just stealing shit. That's also why he would have so many cars, because he would steal cars and like go joyriding and shit like that. Now, apparently before Harris's death, he had handed off like his supply and cash to Eric. And which to me totally tells me that he knew something was going to happen. He knew somebody was going to kill him. I found an article in LA Weekly that breaks it down. Quote, Butler invited him to go for a ride in his truck, driving it to a secret neighborhood location away from prying eyes. Butler looked around, making sure no one was watching, and then reached his hands beneath the side of an abandoned house, retrieving a paper grocery bag. He pulled it open and revealed its contents to Eric. It was bundled up cash, tightly bound with rubber bands into squares. He said, quote, keep an eye on this for me, he said, putting it back. Eric didn't know what to make of this, but he quickly consented. Not long after, just after midnight, Butler was driving in his truck in mid-city LA, about to enter onto the 10 freeway with a passenger in tow. And as he pulled up to the signal light, he was shot 7 times by his own passenger, who promptly jumped out. Eric would eventually say it in rap pages, quote, "Me and him used to be together every day. I just happened to go off and do some business with my mother that night, and I wasn't there. I figured if I was there, I'd probably be dead right along with him." Now, after the death of Horace, Eric would actually consider becoming a postal worker like his father. He was like, I needed to just do something else. But he felt that he was not the type to answer to anyone. So that career was never pursued. Eric was so deep into the game by 1985 when he was around like 21, 22 and had saved up to $250,000, which is really goddamn impressive. Now, early on, Eazy was very known for his like entrepreneurial spirit and his business sense. He would wake up early. He would read the LA Times. He would like sit outside. He'd wait for his friends to wake up so they can hang out or get into trouble, either one. But his personality was that of a man with a little bit of a Napoleon complex, because he was about 5'4" in stature, but he was able to take care of himself because he was strong and stocky. My mom thinks that he used to wear layers, because there are a couple of videos that we watched of him. It was like, this motherfucker, he got 13 flannels. He got so many flannels. No, but they said he was short and stocky, but he was strong. One person said, quote, "If you look at his knuckles, they were gone. They were dimpled. He had scars and shit." This was a quote from Mazik Sivitz, who briefly worked with Eric's label as a member of the hip hop duo Blood of Abraham. He wasn't really that heavy into gangs. This is what the guy said. He said that he was closely affiliated with the Crips, but he was a true hustler. He was not a gang member, which I read that everywhere. He was affiliated with the Crips, but he also knew so many other people. He just knew people. He was very, very, very good at networking. So he was playing around with music for a while with his friends. I mean, there was Dr. Dre, there was Yella. They were with the World Class Wrecking Crew at the time. They were working with this guy named Alonzo Williams. And they were doing more dance party music, nothing gangsta. I mean, they definitely did absolutely non-threatening ass music. Quote, Williams, he donned a black sequin jacket and earrings shaped like stars, while Clientele, who's another member, wore a purple satin tuxedo jacket with black sequined labels and a white dress shirt unbuttoned nearly to his navel. Yella had a similar purple jacket with shoulder pads as well as white gloves. Dr. Dre's white, form-flattering, sequin surgical themed outfit was fashioned for a medical supply store smock. A stethoscope hung around his neck. So they kind of had like the androgyny thing going on. World Class Wrecking Crew was a dancing funk group, quote, makeup was a must for any self-respecting song and dance group of the era, to say nothing of the hair metal bands up on the Sunset Strip. World Class Wrecking Crew had no professional makeup artist, so those duties fell to the act's manager, Shirley Dixon. She powdered their faces to cut the glare and greased their lips to make them shiny, and Dre was painted with blush, and finally, for an extra touch, he and DJ Yella got a smidge of eyeliner. So that was very popular at the time. Dr. Dre and Yella, even though they went on to go do World Class Wrecking Crew, everybody at the time knew everybody wanted to look like Prince. Like, that's what everybody says. Everybody's like, we just wanted to look like Prince. That's what we wanted. And Prince got bitches. So if Prince can get bitches with eyeliner, I can get bitches with eyeliner. We got to remember, these men weren't dressed like this for fucking men. They were dressed like this for the women. Women loved androgyny. You look at people like David Bowie and shit like that. Women love that. Nowadays, I see you some eyeliner. I'm gonna have a little bit of problem with that. What's up with that? Now, at some point, Dr. Dre was just so over it. Like, he wanted to make harder music. The music he was making was getting old. At the same time, there was this Japanese American swap meet dealer named Steve Yao. He was playing World Class Wrecking Crew samples when Eric, Eazy-E, who frequented the his stall, heard Dre's work and asked for his information. At first, his name is Yano. At first, Yano was like apprehensive, but would eventually end up on a hours long call with Eric and Dre. So Yano would also be the one to convince Eric to start a label, because originally Eazy-E wanted to start a store. He wanted a record store. Now, at this time, Dre is getting into trouble and racking up violations and fees on his cars and shit, working with the World Class Record Crew. So he was getting paid by Alonzo, but Alonzo was getting like way more than he was. So eventually Dre would end up in jail because he didn't have the money. And so he asked, well, not because he didn't have the money, but he ended up in jail and stayed in jail because he didn't have the money. And he asked Eric for the money. So Eric obliged, but he asked him for a favor. He said he wanted Dre to help him start a label. So that's kind of how, and we all saw the movie. So there's that. Now, Dre already knew Ice Cube. Cube was like 4 years younger than Dre. Dre met Cube through his cousin, who was working with Cube under the name The Stereo Crew. And since they were like worked together so well previously, Dre brought Cube along and Eric started Ruthless Records. Now, their first song was Boys in the Hood. So it's that song where he's like, cruising down the street in my 6'4", jocking the freaks, clocking the dough. Went to the park to get the scoop. Knuckleheads out there cold shooting some hoops. A car pulls up, who can it be? A fresh El Camino rolling Kilo G. He rolls down the window and he started to say, it's all about making that GTA, cause the boys in the hood are always hard. He says, you come talking that trash, we'll pull your car. Knowing nothing in life but to be legit. Don't quote me, boy, cause I ain't said shit. Oh, I love that song. That song is so good. Oh God, I love that song so much. It's so good. That cruising down the street in my 6'4", that part. I don't even be cruising down the street in a 6'4", and I fucking say that shit. Like, just because anything you cruising in, it's a 6'4". So anyway, I'm a performer, y'all. So their first studio album was Straight Outta Compton. They sold 3 million units without having a radio single. And it's now certified triple platinum. Now, along with Yella, who was a part of the World Class Wrecking Crew with Dre, and MC Ren, who knew Eazy from around the way, N.W.A would get one of the first would go on to be one of the first mainstream gangster rap groups with the success of songs like Fuck the Police, Dope Man, Gangsta Gangsta. Now, Cube once said, quote, it's not like I'm sitting back and making these things up. He said, if I grew up in Beverly Hills, I'd be writing about different things. Our music's not shocking to people who know that world. It's reality. It's shocking to people, outsiders. Sometimes the truth hurts. He said, take a song like Fuck the Police. There's a lot of resentment of police because if you're black, you get picked on a lot. They see you in a car or with a beeper and they assume that you're a dope dealer. The song is a way to get out aggression. We're not really urging anyone to go out and attack the police. So there was also another founding member in 86 named Arabian Prince. In 1986, he was the founding member of N.W.A, but soon after fellow member Ice Cube came back from Phoenix Institute of Technology, actually where he was studying fucking architecture. In 1988, Arabian Prince left. He left over royalty and contract disagreements. He said, I started off as a solo artist, he said. So as I was aware of what a royalty statement was, I knew that when these records were sold, there was a quarterly statement. And when you look at it, you could see how much money was paid and then share it. This was not the case. We were also never paid for touring. Eazy-E, Ice Cube, and MC Ren remained as the main performers, and DJ Yella was the turntablist. Dr. Dre was the main producer. Now, we've all seen who would eventually leave. We all saw the movie. By 1989, Ice Cube would eventually leave due to contract disputes as well, because Cube, Eazy, and Jerry Heller, they were like, really, it was Cube who was just like, look, these fucking numbers ain't right. I ain't signing shit until I get paid for the work I've already done. He would eventually, and now I have seen some sources that said that he did eventually file a lawsuit, but it was settled out of court. And then then Jerry Heller always goes off and say he's never been sued. So, I mean, I don't know if he's saying that he publicly, because I think he filed the lawsuit and then they settled. So technically he really wasn't sued, quote unquote. It never got to that point. So you settle it out of court, it's settled out of court. So dropping a diss track eventually called No Vaseline, which I don't know if any of y'all ever listen to No Vaseline. You literally feel like you've been violated for them. The secondhand embarrassment that comes with No Vaseline. Now, No Vaseline was Cube's track in response to N.W.A. I really wish I could play these fucking songs on this podcast. But No Vaseline was in response to N.W.A.'s diss track. They had a diss track called 100 Miles and Running and Real Niggas. Now, one of those tracks, and if it was 100 Miles and Running, yes, it was 100 Miles and Running. Dre says this weird quote about Benedict Arnold. It was weird. And really N.W.A. were the first to take a shot. And then, they came out with another diss after, because Cube was quite surprised that No Vaseline. I mean, he was quite surprised that he was being dissed. So that's why there's so much anger in No Vaseline. Now, it's weird too. Jerry Heller, who would eventually join, and we'll talk about him, of course. He would eventually join Ruthless. He would say that he had never been sued, and he would repeat this constantly. Yet, like I said, he was technically kind of sued by Cube. It's weird. I can't find much else on the settlement. I mean, he would later go on to sue the producers of, Jerry Heller would later go on to sue the producers of N.W.A., Eazy's estate and Universal for $110 million, who technically I work for in my non-podcast life, because of the use of his likeness in the movie. He said, quote, I've been in the business for 6 decades. I probably represented almost every major artist in the world, either directly or peripherally. At one time or another, I have a certain reputation, and that reputation certainly doesn't entail the things that they said about me. It was very hurtful. Heller told Rolling Stone of the lawsuit. He said, quote, I thought No Vaseline was hurtful, but actually, this was more hurtful. Look, I am what I am, but I'm not a thief, and I'm not scandalous. I did more for N.W.A. I mean, it was just incredible, the success that we had. So for them to call me a thief is just terrible, and I'm just not going to allow it. Jerry Heller then would die in a car accident in 2016, but the lawsuit was eventually dismissed. Now, quote, plaintiff fails to allege sufficient facts to establish that Heller is a co-author of the screenplay, and the allegations establish that Universal was licensed to use the screenplay. Judge Michael Fitzgerald wrote in his decision, as the parties previously agreed, the motion is granted without leave to amend and the action is at last dismissed. Jerry Heller is an interesting character. In this whole saga, he feels like, it seems as though he felt like what was important was his legacy. Obviously, all of these guys do. But the bigger issue, and what I think I'm starting to really realize about all of this, is that the reason why he can so comfortably say, well, then why haven't they sued me? Wasn't because the contract wasn't shit. It was because they signed a shit contract. It's as simple as that. The reason why he can so vehemently say, I didn't steal from them, is because technically they consented to being stolen from. That's the difference. You know what I mean? It's really just words at that point. And I think that he's basically saying that they signed contracts. So I can't rip them off if they sign, if I put in black and white what I'm doing. You know what I mean? Now, is it ethically right? Morally or ethically? Sure. No, it isn't. It's not. It sucks. But I'm not gonna lie. Towards the end of this, I'm like, it's really on easy. because Eazy should have looked out for his friends. Jerry Heller, being a white Jewish man in the music industry who's represented all of these people, knows and understands this industry better than Eazy does. But Eazy knew that he was eating like a fat rat and Cube wasn't, and Cube's the one writing all these records. So, you knew, just off the strength of that, Eazy put entirely too much trust into Jerry Heller. And I think there is a little bit of greed that came with Eazy. I think he felt like he deserved it. I think he wholeheartedly felt like he deserved to get paid what he got paid. But I think what he needed to understand was that Cube also deserved to get paid for what he got paid too. And I'm going to give you another example of how fucking stupid this whole thing was, because they tried to do something similar to Dre as well. When the Jerry Heller and Cube thing happened, they had basically tried to get him to do more work before paying him, when he was kind of like, I want to get paid for the work that I've already done. It's not the money that you can't advance me for money that you can't advance me money that I've already earned. You see what I'm saying? So that's where Jerry Heller is kind of a little shaky. So anyway, Jerry Heller entered the track as part owner of Ruthless Records in 1987. He was introduced by to Eazy by Alonzo Williams. Alonzo Williams fucking just shady as fuck too, though. So, but he was a Jewish man who came from kind of shaky beginnings. He would eventually become an agent. He represented a lot of talent. He represented The Who, Carly Simon, Cat Stevens, a bunch of people. He had worked for like Elton John. He was considered one of the most influential managers in the business. Now, he would go on to become addicted to drugs and alcohol, and he would lose everything. There was a point where he was living on his mom's couch. He eventually ended up working with Macola to help them get deals at reputable labels, because Macola was a distribution company. Eventually, Eazy claimed, at some point, Eazy claimed that that Jerry was the first white guy that he had ever talked to that wasn't collecting rent or trying to arrest him. So Jerry was apparently into the music, which I believe and kind of don't, because he was desperate. But Eazy played all this like raunchy rap music for this man, and like he seemed to have really fucked with it, because I think he also came out of that counterculture shit where, it goes against the grain, and it's violent, and it's packs a lot of punch, and it's controversial. So you're gonna get a good response. So I think Jerry and Eazy did have that in common. Now, at first, Jerry thought that N.W.A stood for No Whites Allowed, and Eazy was like, close enough. But one source said that Jerry had a 20% deal with Eazy, and even Suge would later say that Jerry's deal was 20%. Now, there were other sources that would say that Jerry had half of Ruthless, which could have been adjusted as they became successful. But the way Jerry claims, he said that he elected that Eazy split the company. Eazy elected to split the company down the middle, and then Jerry resisted. He was like, look, we should do the industry standard, because Jerry said he understood, I'm a white guy, you're a black entrepreneur. He's like, I can't really take more than that without, looking like I'm fucking ripping you off. So Jerry was forced to choose at some point between Macola and Eazy, obviously, conflict of interest. And he chose Eazy. Jerry didn't have much to lose, honestly. He ended up really close with Eazy, and he had apparently taught Eazy how to open a bank account and handle his money. They said that Jerry and Eazy kind of had a father-son relationship. Now, you know what I mean? I love giving the motherfucking benefit of the doubt. Not everybody deserves it. I wasn't there. I don't know these people. But Eazy has seemed to, Eazy and Jerry had a very father-son relationship. It's how it reads on paper. I mean, Eazy relied on his business acumen, but he also relied on him for all of his personal things too. So, Jerry would eventually develop relationships with Eazy's children. I don't know. I'm gonna shut up. I don't know. So anyway, but Eazy was truly a black entrepreneur. Ruthless Records was the #1 independent label in America, and the largest black owned record label since Berry Gordy's Motown. They signed JJ Fad, which was a female group who did the single Supersonic. That Supersonic song was super popular. It was one of the first releases for Ruthless. They sold about 400,000 copies. After that run, Dre would push Eazy to rap, but he was terrible at it. Eazy was developing an insecurity because he was off beat. Meanwhile, they only pushed him out because he looked like a kid. They were like, yeah, maybe he should go out first because he's like, shit, he 5'4". He kind of got this like childlike appearance. This will be controversial. So they would go to release N.W.A and the Posse in 1987 under Macola. Then they would release Eazy Does It, Eazy's debut album in 1988, which is a fantastic fucking album. I revisited the album front to back. Loved it. I love the Eazy Does It album. And then, of course, Straight Outta Compton, which they released that in the same year. And then they released 100 Miles and Running in 1990. And then they released E Fil For Zaggin', which is Niggas for Life Backwards, in 1991. Now, if there was no Eazy, there would be no Jay-Z, no Puffy, no Master P, no Birdman. Eazy paved the way for drug dealers turned CEO. Fuck the Police had become a rallying cry for the Rodney King riots, and is still being used politically to confront the police to this day all over the world. So they represented an even deeper counterculture within the hip hop genre. Hip hop had already had this counterculture spin on things because it was so raw, it was so gritty, and it was explaining these people's lives. But then when N.W.A come out, because the New York rappers weren't really engaged in this level of vulgar shit. N.W.A was vulgar. They cursed a lot. But then even the white kids loved it. Ice Cube would later say, quote, before N.W.A, you had to pretend to be a good guy. That's a lot to say because it's almost like he's saying that N.W.A represented the guy who the bad guy in a way. You know, it's giving you all of the nasty shit. It's not just sanitizing it a little bit so it could be more palatable to a larger group. They're telling you what the story is. It's up to you to choose to accept it or not. N.W.A gave the LA gangsta a voice, but it also shared with the world the hood experience, because there are a lot of shit that goes on and you're like, oh God, y'all had that experience. This fucking sucks. So Cube's writings, now mind you, Cube grew up on the more friendlier side of things. I'm only saying that because it didn't seem like he really engaged in too much crazy shit. But what he was he was able to take the stories of the people he knew and create great lyrics, because Cube was a fantastic writer. Now, what's crazy about that too is I will never forget this. And my mom says she will never forget this either. My uncle was the first person to say the best nigga in N.W.A is Cube. Period. And my uncle's a Virgo, so when he says period, that means it's literally a period. There's nothing else to talk about. So he was like, it's Cube. Cube's the writer. So it would kind of make sense that after Cube's departure, Dre would leave, and that after that, it kind of just snowballed. Sip. Now, Dre had been talking to Suge regarding his contract with Jerry and Eazy. And he realized that Ice Cube was right. And Eazy and Jerry were playing them. The DLC, who, oh my God, I just started like re-listening to the DLC. I know they just did a documentary that was at a film festival about him. His story is heartbreaking because he was also a huge talent. But the DLC was involved because he was being managed at that point by Suge and was kind of trying to convince Dre, like, you should talk to the dude, Suge. You should talk to Suge. So eventually Eazy would get beat up, allegedly. Eazy would get beat up by Suge and his people and be forced to let Dre go, as well as, I think, Michelle A and the DLC. Now, this is what's crazy. The Eazy-E got beat up thing was mentioned in the movie. But there are some movies that just kind of say that like they threatened him. They apparently went a little something like Eazy thought that he was attending a meeting with Dre. He ended up actually meeting with Suge, which is never good. Suge had apparently threatened to kill Jerry. So he claimed that Jerry was like tied up in an unmarked van. And he had also claimed that he knew where Eazy's mother lived. So Eazy was rattled. So we got two stories here. Either Eazy got beat up or that happened. Or, I mean, it also could be a third. It could have been both. But then Jerry was also being harassed. And apparently what they ended up doing is they ended up writing letters out to all of their labels saying, do not work with you. First of all, you can't work with Dre. Eazy-E has recently been threatened by, Suge Knight, who's in charge of Death Row Records, or Suge Knight, or just Suge Knight in general, because I don't think Death Row Records didn't exist at this point, technically. Suge is out here threatening motherfuckers, and he's signing things under duress. So until we straighten that out, don't work with Dre. That's kind of how they set it up. So after the threats from Suge, Jerry had hired an ex-Mossad agent named Mike Klein, who was Israeli born, and Eazy would put him in charge of his business affairs, which would give him 50% of the company apparently in 1992, which is fucking wild to me. There was never a deal though. From what I read, there was never a deal on paper, which is mad shady. By 1991, N.W.A was done. Now, I mean, they were just done. It's too messy. According to the LA Times, quote, Wright sued Young when the latter jumped ship in 1991 to start his own label. That suit, which maintained that Wright was the sole owner of Ruthless, was thrown out by the judge. Of course, Dre and Suge denied the beating, but we knew what could have happened. The DLC, Dre and Suge would go on to make Death Row Records. And at this point, Eazy and Dre are beefing with one another. So Dre will release The Chronic with a few diss lines towards Eazy on Fuck With Dre Day and everybody celebrating. And Eazy will respond with Real Motherfucking G's and Its Own, which was on his album, Its Own, 1A7 Killer. Jerry claimed to have offered Dre a $20 million deal with Irving Azoff and Warner Brothers with an immediate $2 million payment to Dr. Dre. However, due to the controversial message of N.W.A and Ice-T's Cop Killer song, the deal was vetoed by Warner Brothers Records President Mo Ostin. Now, I wanted to mention that weird deal that he had, Jerry offered him, because they got into the habit of, we're not going to admit that we owe you money, but what we're going to do is we're going to kind of put you back. We're going to make another deal for you to do more work. Cause it's like, okay, you offer him a $20 meal with a $20 deal with a $2 million advance. Why are you advancing him money for work that he's already done? An advance is an advance. It's not. You already owe this man for work. And this is the same thing they did with Cube. I can't fix what already happened, but this is what I can do. I can't offer you a $20 million deal where you could go do more slave labor for another motherfucker. What? It's kind of like it's almost like a robbing Peter to pay Paul type of situation. Because just like with Cube, it's like, this is what I can do for you going forward. But retroactively, you owe me money. I don't have to do more work for money that you owe me. You know what I mean? So they tried to pull the same shit with Dre. Now, you're probably thinking, okay, we already know this shit. Most of us grew up on Eazy. Some of us didn't, but what does this have to do with true crime? Why are we even talking about this? Because of the death of Eazy-E. I'm going to give you a little more backstory, because Eazy-E's career appeared to be dwindling as an artist, but as a producer and a mogul, Eazy-E would kind of continue to work with new acts. I mean, he had started a Chicano rap group called Brownside. He obviously had the harmonious rap group Bone Thugs and Harmony. And he had run like through a slew of fucking women. Like, he was busy. And he had like 7 children by 6 women. And at this time, he was dating this woman named Tamika Woods. And she was a former secretary of Clarence Avant. I don't know if you've all ever heard of Clarence Avant, but he's the godfather of black music. That's what they call him. He managed like Sarah Vaughan, Jimmy Smith, Lalo Schifrin, who I love me some Sarah Vaughan and Lalo Schifrin. They presided over Venture. He presided over Venture Records, Sussex Records, and Taboo Records, signing the likes of Bill Withers, Kool and the Gang, SOS Band, Jimmy Jam and Terry Lewis, and a bunch of other projects. So Tamika and Eazy, they got together. They had a son together, Dominic, and then she was 3 weeks pregnant when Eazy died. 3 months pregnant when Eazy died. Now, Tamika would also marry him 12 days before he died. Now, this is according to Jerry. He did what he did. I did what I did. And if he was doing something that I didn't like, he wouldn't come around. It started in November, right before Thanksgiving of 1994. And there were a lot of people around him, as happens when a company is enormously successful. But just like it happened around the Jackson 5, pretty soon everybody had their own lawyer and everybody had their own agent and everybody had their own publicist. And that's what happens. And Eazy has stood up for me against Cube and Dre, Don King, Jesse Jackson, Clarence Avant, and Minister Farrakhan. Lots of people tried to take shots at Jerry Heller once they saw that rap music was going to be what it became. And I think that towards the end of 1994, a lot of people were in his ear. Jerry's doing this and Jerry's doing that. He's charging you to do too much and he's making more than you are, and whatever they were telling him. I think that this was the final stages of a terrible, terrible, debilitating, horrible death disease. And he just didn't have the strength to just do it anymore. I think that whatever he thought to himself, I think that he was thinking that it would be hard to have a N.W.A reunion with me around. So he would have to deal with that somehow, because there is nothing that he wanted more in his life, nothing more than an N.W.A reunion. That was his all-consuming desire. And I certainly would have moved to the background to facilitate something like that. Nothing would have made me happier than an N.W.A reunion. I think that this disease had just devastated him to the point where it had affected his relationships, and he went into the hospital. I think in January of 1995, we finished the Bone Thugs album in August of 1994. January of 1995, went into the hospital. About that time, I stopped coming to the office. In February of 1995, I got a letter from him, supposedly from him, but people around him told me that he was in the hospital signing all kinds of blank documents, and people filled in whatever they wanted to. I think on February 16th or the 17th, that was the end of my relationship with Ruthless. Now, we all know that Eazy's dead, right? I hope so. We all know that he's dead. He's been dead for a while. The interesting part about all this to me is there's some things that were kept secret. Obviously, he is a celebrity. Me and my mom had a very interesting discussion about that too. We're going to get into that. But by his death, Jerry didn't even have a stake in the company. And according to Heller, Ruthless was never sued, but this doesn't mean the deals weren't shady. Like I said before, some people firmly believe that if you sign a bad deal, that's on you. That's not the company. So why sue? And needless to say, Eazy had some fair share of enemies. He had beef with Dr. Dre. He had beef with Cube, Jerry Heller, Suge, all of the new Death Row records, and the government. Now, at the time of Eazy's planning to do like an N.W.A reunion tour, like Jerry mentioned, and as we know, Jerry thinks it's possible that Eazy got rid of him to have the tour. He could have also just been delusional. Jerry's can sometimes have this like white savior attitude, And it could very well be that he was a white savior. But I also think that it could be that, you know, he's been so desperately trying to clean up his legacy after this. He does not want to be identified as a cheat. It's kind of like with Levy when Frank, what's his name? I'll always want you. What is Frankie Lyman and the Teenagers. I think there was a point where it was like, look, you signed a shitty deal. It is what it is. And I think what you got to understand about Black people is now you've breached that trust. So we always coming after you for that. You know what I mean? You were making all these money. You were living all this lavish lifestyle while Cube is still living with his parents. And he's the main one writing these albums. You know what I mean? Like, that doesn't make any sense. And I think that you can't be mad at Cube for being mad at you just because you allowed a 16-year-old to sign a bad deal. He's gonna resent you for that. Whether or not legally he can do anything is one thing, but personally, yeah, he's gonna come for you. Like, he's going to. And I know that, like, you know, for a time they were calling Ice Cube anti-Semitic and, you know, things like that, because of the statements that he made in No Vaseline about Jerry. But it's like, so Jerry, you thought you were exempt from he been calling everybody else niggas, bitches, and hoes, and you think you get exempt because he called you a Jew? It's like, sir, why are you exempt? You know, like, you're just not. So, anyway, I digress. But my point is that Jerry had this desire to really clean up his name by the end of all of this, especially by the time the movie came out. I didn't read Jerry's book. Honestly, I'm interested, but part of me is I don't completely trust him. And I think that's why, like, I was trying not to include so many quotes from him, but unfortunately he is kind of, towards the end of his life, he was kind of the remaining easy voice of those early ruthless years, which is the reason why he felt the need to sue Universal, because ultimately he knew that they had to have taken some of this stuff from his book, which I'm like, whatever. I don't know. I'm not an attorney. Now, let me get back to this. Now, Eazy had his fair share of enemies. Eazy had gone to N.W.A with Bone Thugs, and they complained about how he was in New York with no coat, because, you know, Eazy's from Ohio, Bone Thugs is from Ohio. So he said, quote, this is what Crazy Bone said: before we went out, Eazy had gone and bought us all leather jackets. Eazy had one, but when he came out to the hotel and went to the club, he didn't have anything on but a sweatshirt. Plus his jerry curl was wet. So we were like, man, you're going to catch pneumonia. We're from Cleveland. We know about how jerry curls are in the wintertime. You got to cover your shit up. So Greg Mack, one of Eazy's engineers, would later say it was never anything serious. He'd go to the hospital every now and then. And honestly, we thought it was just because of all the weed he smoked. Now, the weed that he smoked is interesting too, because in the beginning, they said that Eazy didn't really smoke weed. He started to smoke weed, but Eazy was also bronchial, apparently. So they had kind of got used to him wheezing and coughing. Wheezing and coughing and shit. And so they were kind of like, I don't know, we just thought it was the weed he smoked. Some people smoke. I had an ex who smoked a lot of weed, and, you know, he coughed like a motherfucker. He was always coughing. So according to Mike Klein, now Mike Klein ended up being he's the Mossad agent that Jerry ended up hiring. According to Mike Klein, Eazy had gone to Norwalk Hospital on February 16th and was diagnosed with bronchitis. It ran in his family, apparently, but it's likely that he was just misdiagnosed. And so on February 24th, 1995, Eazy was admitted to Cedars-Sinai with a terrible cough. Apparently, Eazy had just like terrible, like trouble breathing. Even though they knew he had asthma, they were like, it's likely that his cough was just dismissed for years for that reason. And while he was in the hospital, Eazy was diagnosed with AIDS, full blown. He then got married on March 14th. He went into a coma on March 15th, and then a public statement was released on March 16th. By March 26, 1995, Eazy was dead. Eric Wright was 31. Now, I gave you a lot of information right before I told you he was dead because we all know he was dead. We all know he died of AIDS. Now, Eazy's death became suspect as friends and family found it strange that the disease progressed so quickly. Eazy's second child, E.B., would later campaign and refute the diagnosis and how he contracted the disease. But here's what we know. Eric was extremely promiscuous. He slept with so many fucking women, and he had multiple girlfriends. There is still speculation on how many children he actually has. Some say 11, some say 7, some say 8, some say 9, all with different women, except one. I think one he had 2 with. Yes, one he had 2 with, which would have been his last wife. So Eazy apparently had around 9 children, maybe. I don't know. 6 sons, Eric Jr., Elijah, Marquise, David, Dominic, and Derek. And then 3 daughters, Erin, who goes by E.B., Deja, and Raven. Now, as we know, in 1980s, HIV was considered a gay disease or a disease considered through or spread through intravenous drug use. It's extremely likely, though, that a young man in 1980s with as many sexual partners as he had could have contracted HIV much earlier. And years later, the virus started to catch up with him. So I want to preface these conspiracies with this. Clinical latency is uncommon, but possible. According to Far Out magazine, quote, people can live healthily with AIDS for years without displaying symptoms, and it is not uncommon for the onset of illness to cause rapid deterioration in health. The article goes on to say that furthermore, the fact that none of Eazy's apparent sexual partners didn't contract the virus is also easily explainable. According to a study in 2009 by Stanford Health, the transmission risk for unprotected vaginal sex is around 0.08% for receptive sex and 0.04 for insertive sex, which is incredibly low. According to the CDC today, the highest rate of exposure is through blood transfusion and needle sharing and technically receptive anal sex. Okay, so receptive is obviously when you receive a penis. Insertive is when the penis goes in it. So the types of exposure is broken down as blood transfusion, needle sharing, percutaneous, which is a needle stick. Then there's sexual, which is receptive anal intercourse, insertive anal intercourse, receptive penile vaginal intercourse, insertive penile vaginal intercourse, and then receptive and insertive oral intercourse, which is incredibly low. But I will say this. Me and my mom had this conversation yesterday. Don't know if you ever listen to Dope Man. I don't. I'm going to find the lyric. Because in Dope Man, Eazy-E, not Eazy-E, fucking Ice Cube. He mentions strawberry, and I'll tell you the line. Here it is. Just call her Strawberry and everybody knows Strawberry is the neighborhood hoe. Do anything for a hit or two. Give the bitch a rock. She fucked the whole damn crew. It might be your wife. It might make you, excuse me. It might be your wife and it might make you sick. It might make you sick. Come home and see her mouth on the dope man's dick. Strawberry, just look and you will see her. But don't fuck around. She'll give you gonorrhea. And people out here not hip to the fact that Strawberry is a girl that's selling pussy for crack. To the dope man. Now, I'm saying this because I quoted this. I didn't quote this directly to my mom. And obviously I know how the song goes, but I just grabbed it and I wanted to slow down so you can hear it. So I told my mom, I was because she was and let's be honest. This is what my mom said. And let's be honest, he sold drugs. Some motherfuckers on the street used to actually get sexual favors from crackheads and drug users. If you are growing up in a time where you are only thinking that this is a gay person's issue, and I'm not saying this is what happened, I'm just putting all the pieces out there. I'm saying that there's a high probability that a person who was a drug dealer could have engaged in sex acts with people who were selling their bodies for drugs. That can lead to getting a virus. I think we can all agree with that. And so when I was talking to my mom, I was like, oh yeah, like the Dope Man lyric when Ice Cube's talking about strawberry. And I was like, I really didn't want to sing the lyric to it because I'm like, it's vulgar as fuck. But when he says, you know, that strawberry is a girl selling pussies for crack to the dope man, that part, I was like, that kind of is what we're talking about. Let's not act like this isn't a part of the culture. You feel me? So to me, even though we know that you can't, you know, it's incredibly low to get it through receptive or insertive oral intercourse, we do know that people who shared needles, so, you know, people who obviously were on heroin and things like that and were sharing needles could have easily, and I don't know that he was selling heroin, but just because he sells crack and he's selling crack to a drug addict doesn't mean he's not selling crack. It just doesn't mean that the drug addict only does crack. You see what I'm saying? So I think that there's a lot of things to consider here. Yes, there's the promiscuousness of him. He clearly had a lot of women. He had a lot of girlfriends. I also feel like low key, he could be the type of personality that could be like, hey, you need to give me oral sex if you want these drugs. I'm just saying, I'm just looking at the music. I don't know him. But I'm looking at the music. And if we look at the music and we see these types of details, I think they're important to mention. I'm going to leave that there. Now, we also know that the media's goal is to kind of scare you to death. And at this time, they always show the worst case scenario. So same thing happened with COVID, right? Not that it wasn't terrible, because it was fucking terrible. We still dealing with this shit 3 years later. But how we feel about it is much, much different over how we felt about it in 2020. And most of us have had it by now. But people were seeing one thing on TV, and the experience of the actual people was different with AIDS. So we were seeing the Kaposi sarcoma. You know, you see movies like Gia, Philadelphia, you know what I mean? You hear about Freddie Mercury, you hear about Rock Hudson, you hear about, you know, just all of these people who went through the stages of HIV. I do understand why people had so many questions regarding Eazy-E's diagnosis. Like, for one, how did no one know he looked so fucking healthy? Why did he not pass it on to any of his children's moms, his wife, or honestly, any of his friends, considering they engaged in group sex while they were on tour? Why was he asymptomatic when that never seemed to be the case in the late 80s, early 90s? Other than his cough, he was not really sickly. Then there was the question of, was he just flat out murdered? Who was there in the hospital on his final days, and why was there no autopsy performed? To me, these answers can be easily kind of explained away, but I think it's also important to look at all the contributing factors. So let's address some of the conspiracies. Jerry Heller. Now, obviously, there's a motive there. Jerry Heller had recently lost control over Ruthless because Eazy suspected that Jerry was, in fact, shady. Now, according to Jerry, he was removed because Eazy was desperate to do a reunion tour. In Jerry Heller's book, Ruthless, he says, quote, "It would be hard to imagine a pussy hound more rabid than Eric Wright. Even before Ruthless kicked into high gear, he had multiple girlfriends. I would sit with him in that little former porn video office adjacent to Lanark Park and marvel as I listened to him talk to his multiple lovers on the phone, one after another. Eric, I would say to him, sadly, prescient, pussy is going to be your downfall. He was so smart in every other way. Women were his Achilles heel. And I couldn't believe that a guy with so few other weaknesses indulged himself in such a huge one. While Jerry believes Eazy contracted AIDS the old-fashioned way, Bone Thug said that Eazy was coughing in late 1994. And early January 1995, it developed into pneumonia. Lazy Bone tied it all together by suggesting it was Heller's doctors Eazy visited. Quote, I was kind of thinking like, who the fuck doctors did he go to? I think it was Jerry Heller's doctors that he went to, and he had just got fired. So I'm like, I don't know. Bo claims indeed, however, holes in the theory appear when Bone tied the decline of Eazy to his 1991 appearance at the Republican White House luncheon with President George W. Bush and suggested it was Jerry Heller who pushed for the deathbed marriage to Tamika Woods. Lazy believes that he got sick on the trip to New York. Now, the whole he got sick on the trip to New York thing is interesting. Because him not wearing a coat, I mean, that can make a motherfucker sick. That lowers the immune response. Him having a jerry curl in the winter, not wearing a coat, could have easily got him sick. I think that there is some truth to him being sick in New York, but to say that it was Jerry and then to say that he got sick in New York, I mean, it's kind of like he didn't say he got sick with AIDS in New York. He was saying that he ultimately his immune system could have weakened on that trip to New York. Jerry lost control of Ruthless. I don't know if he could be a killer though, because at the end of the day, somebody like Jerry, who is, has nothing to lose at this point. He's out of the company. He does have a motive. I just don't know if he would go through that type of length, but I don't know this man either. I don't know. The Jerry theory that don't seem like the one to me. I know that when WeTV came out with the documentary was called The Mysterious Death of Eazy-E. They questioned Jerry's cousin, Jerry Ballin, and he vehemently denies any allegations of Jerry stealing, which he would. I mean, he would. That's his cousin. He would. And they try to push this narrative that Jerry truly loved Eazy-E. They had a father and son relationship. I know what people are capable of doing when they feel betrayed. I just don't know if Jerry's that creative. I think that's pretty creative to give figure out a way for somebody to get AIDS. I just think that's too weird. If Jerry knew about it, I think that's a whole other topic, but I don't know. The Jerry conspiracy I think Jerry was a lot of things. A murderer? I don't think so. I really don't. Not in the shit that I've read. And honestly, who knows? Eazy-E, his voice is the only one that would probably really know. Now, there's another conspiracy theory that from this dude named Kid Frost, who was signed to Ruthless. He claimed that Eazy hurt himself. He hurt his back on a quad runner and was referred to an acupuncturist by Jerry Heller, which is another Jerry Heller conspiracy. He believed that Eazy contracted the virus from a dirty acupuncture needle. And it's not impossible to get it wasn't impossible to get it that way 25 years ago, because back then, they actually used to sanitize their needles and reuse them. Nowadays, when we get acupuncture, they use disposable needles that they just toss after each use. Now, Kid Frost said that Eazy was not talking to Jerry at the time. And according to Jerry Ballin, Jerry's cousin, the acupuncturist was reputable and would not have killed a celebrity for Jerry. You know what I mean? Like his thing was like the acupuncture was like a Beverly Hills acupuncturist. He's not going to fucking kill Eazy-E, for that purpose. But due to the methods, I think there's a possibility of contamination. So Jerry Ballin, the cousin, does believe though that there was just too short a time between the diagnosis and the death. He did think that was weird, but he does not believe that Jerry Heller had any access to Eazy, and neither did Jerry Ballin, by the time he died. So most people were not allowed in to see him. And it's important to mention that because Evie had a strong relationship with Heller. So in the documentary, she was trying to kind of steer away from the Jerry thing anyway, which then questions of whether or not you really want to get the truth or not. I don't know. I feel like you do have to explore all possibilities. And she did, but she truly didn't believe that Jerry had anything to do with it. Now, Eazy's daughter, Evie, was able to listen to a recording of Toker, who was one of Eazy's Latino artists. And in the recording, Toker was told by Eazy to return to the hospital the following day with the homies and the lowriders. And Toker was told that the bronchitis had Eazy fucked up. And all he said by the end was he was left alone with Eazy, and there was some others. He said, quote, "There was some other things that were said, man, some crazy shit that was said, man. I'll leave it at that." End quote. Now, this furthers a narrative that Eazy wanted to be removed from the hospital, but this doesn't really mean anything. It's a possibility that Eazy simply just wanted to leave the hospital. Who the fuck wants to be in a hospital? Now, back to Mike Klein. He was also mentioned in the documentary because he was a handler and Eric's safety net, kind of. Mike Klein is not allowed to say much because of his lawsuit that he had against Eazy's estate, which, as we know, Mike Klein was awarded money because he owned half of Ruthless. I did find a Times article from 1995 that said that the court administrator, this is a quote, will first review allegations posed in a lawsuit filed by former Ruthless employee Mike Klein that questions the legality of Wright's deathbed marriage to Woods, which took place about March 22nd in the intensive care unit of Cedars-Sinai Medical Center. Woods had known Wright for 5 years and lived with him for 3 years. Klein's claim also challenges the validity of a trust document that the rapper signed during his final days designating Woods and Wright's former attorney, Ronald L. Sweeney, as co-trustees, as well as several members of the Wright's family, including his mother and father. According to Klein's suit, Wright was heavily medicated and was forced to sign his trust and his marriage certificate. The suit also alleges that Wright turned over half of the firm to Klein in 1992 and that the money is now missing from a company bank account to which only Woods and Sweeney had access. Woods and Sweeney denied the allegations. Now, I want to go back to what they just said. Wright was heavily medicated and was forced to sign his trust and marriage certificate. What's weird about that is that Jerry does mention that, there was a period where Eric was forced to sign a bunch of blank sheets of paper and shit. Not probably forced, but he was just probably just drugged and he signed them. But so me and my mom were like, why can't the daughter get access to the marriage certificate? Because there's a part in it where she didn't request she says something along the lines of like, why, we were so getting used to being told no that we didn't even think that we could get the death certificate, because they were questioning whether or not Eazy, at that time they were questioning whether or not Eazy died of AIDS at all. And so on his death certificate, he died of AIDS related pneumonia. And so then there's a part where she says, well, I can't get the marriage certificate because it's confidential, which I was like, wow, does that exist? Why is that a thing? And then I looked it up, and apparently in California, marriage certificates can be locked. It was like this old law from like the 1800s that they put into place for people who were in like, what do you call them? Who were having like children out of wedlock and all that shit like that. But it's interesting because that's the only state that does it. California is the only state that does confidential marriage licenses. I just thought that it was weird. So I was like, why would this be a thing? And so, but it's interesting too, because it makes you want, I'm like, but why wouldn't his child have access? Because the way they explain it is, even if it's not available to the public, like technically, if Eazy-E and his current wife's marriage license was available publicly, I would be able to get it. Like, that's how public it is. But if you have a confidential license, you have to go through like some process or whatever. And the children, or I guess like any known relative, has access to it. So then it made me ask the question of whether or not Eazy-E is on EB's birth certificate. Like, my father's not on mine. You know what I'm saying? Because I'm like, why would you not have access to it unless they feel like they cannot prove that you are his child? You know, and, you know, they look at vital records for that type of shit. That's kind of how they do their how they decide. And, you know, with that being said, the same thing kind of happened. So when she's talking to Mike Klein, and he can't speak on the marriage because obviously he's wrapped up in a lawsuit, but he asked the grandmother she tells E.B., you should probably talk to your grandmother. And I think it's important to mention Eazy-E's mother, because there's this like weird thing too that's about his birth date, because when she retrieves the death certificate, the daughter Erica, she claims that the grandmother used to say that she didn't believe that he died of AIDS. But I don't know what his mom knows. But his death certificate says 1963. But she didn't correct, she claims that that's not when he was born, because at the beginning of the documentary, they are adjusting his headstone to have the correct date on it. When E.B. gets the actual death certificate, Vital Records has Eazy-E's birth date as 1963. The headstone was originally 1963. The daughter, Erica, snuck and got the headstone changed to 1964, when 1963 is actually the correct date. Now, so me and my mom had this conversation. What is with Eazy-E's birthday? Because if the death certificate says 1963, this is from my mom's investigating, you know, this is the knowledge that she has investigating my grandmother's death when we were trying to file a malpractice suit. The Vital Records connects your death certificate with your birth certificate. So whatever is on your birth certificate, it is what they put on your death certificate. Also, when you're getting a headstone made, they typically, if I'm not mistaken, ask for the death certificate. They want to know that they're not making a fucking headstone for somebody who's not dead, right? So the headstone's kind of been right the whole time. But then the question is, why would the mother not know when her own son was born? So there's two things that she could have done. She could have had the Vital Records people fix it, I suppose. I don't know what that process looks like. I mean, it was the early 60s, but it was also California. I'm like, I don't see why they would have fucked that up. But, you know, it's not like he was born at the end of the year, and they, you know what I mean? It was just a typo. He was born in September. It's like, so to me, it's also just very strange that my mom's theory is that there's a question of paternity there, because for you to be so adamant on this man being born in 1964, she's just like, he was born in 1964. No, he was born in 1964. Shut the fuck up. He was born in 1964. I keep telling you. And she kept saying that the 1963 date was a typo by the printer, even though his death certificate says 1963. So that's just weird. I'm sorry. I'm like, it's kind of like a stream of consciousness. I'm just talking to you now, because at this point I've been trying to work this out in my head. I'm like, what other reason would she have to be, other than the fact that maybe he was born in 1964? But then when E.B. gets the death certificate, which is generally connected by Vital Records to the birth certificate, that means that his birth certificate says that he's 1960. He was born in 1963. And speaking of birth certificates, I'm wondering if Evie has her father, Eric, and I don't know why this woman wouldn't, unless it was anger. I don't know. Some women do that. Don't put that motherfucker on the birth certificate. You know what I'm saying? But I don't know why she wouldn't have access to this confidential marriage license. I don't know. It's weird. And it's, it's something that only California does. It was something that was created in the late 1870s for, unmarried cohabitating couples in the state. And they've never really changed the law, and no other state has picked up the law. So they're kind of the only ones that do it. I don't know. Something's weird about the license thing, and her not. It's not even expensive. It's like $14 to get to get a copy of this shit. So I don't know. But then it made me ask the question, well, if it's a confidential marriage license, for what reason would a person want it to be confidential? What I did see when I looked up private marriage licenses is that no witnesses are needed to be present. Because at first I was like, maybe they wanted it confidential because there were witnesses on there and they don't want anybody to know who the witnesses were. But then you find out that there are no witnesses needed on a private one in order for them to sign it. So, I don't know. It's just, I don't know. It's strange. I'm sorry. I'm confused. This is what I sound like when I'm like thinking. But it's a strange, weird it's a strange piece of legislative garbage, considering the fact that no other state is doing it. I just find it very weird that California does it. So anyway, and I think too, the celebrity component, I think most people will want, most celebrities will probably want their license confidential. But again, the question is, what is on it? What is on it that matters this much that it needs to be confidential? Anyway, now, I don't know. I can't dismiss the whole birthday thing. I couldn't get over that because I'm like, it's 1995. It's not 1965. Why would they get this wrong? And it could be, though, that they did get it wrong in 1963. They thought that maybe the birth certificate's wrong. I just don't know. I really don't know. Now, there were some mention of white supremacists. That was another conspiracy theory. Other than like this, there was this interview recorded by a former friend mentioned in the documentary where Eazy was not warned of being on a white supremacist hit list by the FBI. I don't really have much more on that, but Eazy's relationship with the FBI was unstable. So it's likely that they just didn't even care to tell him. The FBI did continue to investigate Eazy's death because of all of its weirdness. I looked at a heavily redacted FBI report where they mentioned the speedy marriage to Tamika, the fact that that his will was changed when he was near death. Apparently, the state had decided that they were going to manage Ruthless until his affairs were straightened out. And then there's the weirdness of Eazy having a briefcase in his trunk with masters in it and all the Ruthless calls being directed to a company in Canada. No one knows who did that or who ended up with the briefcase. I do have I will very desperately try to read this for you, but it's so redacted that you can barely even. Now, this is in June. He died in March. So on June 12th, 1995, the writer contacted blah, 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 was appointed by the court. I can't even read it, as special administrator for the probate estate of rapper Eric Wright, also known as Eazy-E, and his record company Ruthless Records. While hospitalized at Cedars-Sinai Medical Center, where Eric was in advanced stages of AIDS and close to death, he unexpectedly got married and changed his will. Blank blank claims that she and her blank 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 were made the executors of the will blank blank are being represented by blank blank, claims that Eric promoted him to director of business affairs. We know who that is. Advised that blank 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 is claiming interest in the estate. In addition, there are 8 known offspring of Eric's from several different relationships, also of whom will be claiming an interest in the estate. During blank investigation into who has what claims to the estate, blank told blank that there were several master recordings of unpublished songs contained in suitcases in the trunk of Eric's leased Mercedes. These master recordings are believed to be worth several millions of dollars each. When blank attempted to determine the location of the recordings, since they are considered part of the estate and under the protection of the court, he learned that the suitcases were missing from the car, and that the individual known as blank blank was currently residing in Canada and was allegedly in possession of the suitcases and recordings. Someone had changed the voice message on the answering machine at Ruthless Records in Woodland Hills and requested callers to call a number in Ontario, Canada for information. When blank called the number, blank 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 answered the phone and told blank that blank had put him up to setting up an office in Ontario, Canada. Redacted as hell was opening up the office for Ruthless Records in Ontario, Canada at the request of Redacted as hell. Blank later changed his story and stated blank had told him to set up the company, not blank. Subsequently questioned both blank, and both denied knowing blank or giving him any recordings. Blank then contacted the FBI to determine if the FBI would consider investigating the matter to determine if blank could be identified and interviewed to see if he in fact has the recordings and how he came to possess them. He considers the recordings, if they are in possession of blank, to be stolen. According to blank, the recordings are considered part of the estate and should only be in the possession of Chemical Trust until a judge determines to whom they rightfully belong. Chemical Trust was this weird company that for some reason California was like, you gonna be in possession of Ruthless Records until we figure this out. I don't know how they do that, but apparently the state of California does shit like that. Instead of it going to probate and, being thrown up in the air, and since there's so much litigation behind it, they put it in the hands of a whole nother fucking company. It was like, y'all deal with this until we figure this shit out. Neither blank nor blank have a legal right to possess the recordings, much less distribute them until the court has made determination as to ownership. When I was reading the FBI report, and I was like, this is annoying, seeing all the blanks, I was able to kind of deduce some things. I don't know who would have set up the company in Canada. I don't know if it was Mike Klein. I don't know if it was Jerry Heller. Whoever it was, that motherfucker fled off to Canada saying that he was advised to do so. I don't know who that is. So that's the thing that sucks about this. It's so redacted that I can't even figure it out. I don't have any other reference to a person moving to Canada. But what we do know, even from this, his marriage to Mika has its own messiness, but then also this briefcase with the masters in it comes into play. Just like what happens when everybody dies, things start to get nasty. The Tamika messiness was mentioned in the Times in 1995, and it said, quote, rumors are circulating in the music industry that the marriage and trust documents were orchestrated by Woods and Sweeney to help Motown Records gain control of Ruthless. Woods, who worked for 6 years as an assistant to Motown chairman Clarence Avant, and Sweeney, who had done legal work for Avant frequently in the last decade, called the allegations ridiculous. Avant was out of the country, but Motown spokesman Michael Mitchell said that the allegations were totally unfounded. Now, Tracy Jernigan, who is the mother of E.B., was suspicious of all of it. Hence the documentary. She said, it got chaotic. Everyone was lost, Tracy Jernigan said. She and the other mothers of Eazy's children had descended upon the hospital, and according to Jernigan, things were contentious between the women and Woods. He had ties to many people, not just one girl, and he didn't respect that. The fact that you know someone is dying and you do have the last moments should be utilized very wisely, and I think they should have been utilized differently. Jernigan would later say she was upset there was no autopsy, that the marriage license was private, and that the other mothers were not allowed to visit him. According to the author of the book, Original Gangsters by Ben Westhoff, quote, Sharice Henry, who is Eazy-E's assistant, and she was very suspicious of stuff that was going on during this time too. She saw Eazy revising his will one day, and she thought that was a bad idea. And he had a new lawyer who was taken on by Tamika, and Sharice didn't think he should be revising his will at this stage when he was so sick. Ultimately, Tamika got control of Ruthless, which valued at $30 million at the time, and she took control of the estate. Now, there's a couple problems with, and I've only learned this from my mother because I wasn't alive. People are upset that there was no autopsy. My mother said that yes, when people die in hospital, sometimes the hospital will automatically do an autopsy. When they die at home, that has to be requested by the family. In this case, though, Eazy had AIDS. So my mom did say she doesn't know when they stopped doing it or when they changed the rule, but at some point they really weren't doing autopsies on AIDS patients. I mean, it was also like, what is there to talk about? He had AIDS. There was also no real evidence of anything criminal happening there. So I don't think anybody would have been eager to do an autopsy. You see what I'm saying? And then the marriage license is private. We know that. But now that we know that California does that, and sometimes celebrities do that, I don't think that that's really all that strange. And then also the fact that the other mothers were not allowed to see him, I do understand that, but not really knowing the AIDS, not really knowing whether or not these women were sick themselves. That's number one. And number two, the fact that a lot of AIDS patients, once they just like we did with COVID, once they reach a certain floor, they don't allow visitors. You know, I think they probably made exceptions because of who Eazy-E was. And that's why you had so many specific people that were able to see him. But trying to put, 9 babies and 8 baby mamas in a hospital room with them, and we don't even know whether or not they are free and clear of AIDS. I don't think that's something that would have happened. I'm addressing the culture at the time, and it don't really make sense that they would have allowed a lot of visitors to me. It doesn't really make sense that they would have done an autopsy to me. And I think the only thing that does, so really Tracy Jernigan's issues, the 3 issues that she had about the marriage license being private and the autopsy and the facts that the mothers weren't allowed to visit him, I think they can all be explained away. So I don't know. I'm not an expert. I'm just saying. Now, according to Tamika, she said he went through the whole list of who to trust, who not to trust, who to look out for, who not to look out for. And that was basically it. Woods Wright said, right after the short ceremony, a will was drafted naming Woods Wright and his attorney, Ron Sweeney, co-executors of his estate. Eazy's surgery never happened. And I hear that it happened and I hear that it didn't happen. Don't know which. But instead, he was transferred to the intensive care unit at Cedars and attached to a ventilator. He was in critical condition. I know I did read that there was, some experimental surgery they were trying to get some of the fluid out of his lungs because he had, his T cell count was off in the dirt. And then his lungs were just so filled and so ravaged by pneumonia that one of them ended up collapsing. He ended up on a ventilator. I think they discovered ultimately that the surgery wouldn't be successful even if they tried. So they put him on a ventilator. He ended up being in critical condition. Now, that's that theory so that we got two. We got a couple. We got the acupuncture thing, which I think is like, sure, but we got Jerry Heller was up to it because he sent him to a doctor that injected him with a tainted needle, or that Jerry was just sending him to doctors for bronchitis, knowing that, I don't know, that the whole Jerry thing is just like not really selling. And then there is the wife who, did the speedy marriage, and, all these people who had access to Eazy towards the end of his life, who may have put him in a position to sign all these documents. I think it's too like, yo, he had AIDS, yo, he's dying. He probably like, I don't give a fuck. Here, yes, do it, whatever. He's too focused on the fact that he's 31 and dying, and I mean, which makes it, to me, not legal, if he's being forced to sign things that he doesn't know that he's signing. So there is that part. Do I think that his wife and all of those people had anything to do with his death? No, I think he had AIDS. That's my opinion, for sure. What keeps coming up is, how did he get AIDS? Right? And I understand he slept with all these women. Why didn't the baby mamas have it? We already talked about the rate of transmission. I think the weird part to me is that so many people seem to have been dying at that time. It is very weird that he died so quickly. But one of the doctors, and died so quickly and was asymptomatic, but one of the doctors would later say that he did actually treat a couple of the women that claimed to have slept with Eazy-E, claimed. And then there was a doctor who also said there's the possibility that the HIV virus laid dormant in him for a long fucking time, and that when his immune system tanked, that's when the virus had its opportunity to attack. And when it attacked, it really did attack. Him being bronchial, him being untreated for so long, could have led to the speedy death. Now, there is then the Suge Knight theory. I don't think you could put anything past Suge Knight. But Suge Knight did a weird interview with Jimmy Kimmel. But it's Suge. And had it been anyone else, I don't think we really would have raised any eyebrows. I mean, we all probably would have been like, that's probably the fucked up thing to say. But because it's Suge, he's literally a walking, talking Murphy's Law. Whatever can happen will happen. He had a beef with Eric, obviously. Then he said his weird shit in 2003.
I'll come check you out, right?
Right.
Why the bulletproof vest?
Oh, it's not. Oh, no, that's just, it's new style. You've been in the can for a while. That's what all the talk show hosts are wearing.
This is a new thing, right?
Yeah.
See, if somebody gonna do something about it,
Right.
Technology is so high, right?
Right.
So if you shoot somebody, you go to jail forever. So the kids, you don't want to go to jail forever, right? So they got this new thing out there. People sell them all the time. They got this stuff they get blood from somebody with AIDS.
Yeah.
And then they shoot you with it.
Oh, so that seems bad.
That's a slow death.
Yeah.
An Eazy-E thing, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Oh, no. Okay.
So what? Now, according to Ben Westhoff, quote, Eazy-E was trying to recruit Tupac to Ruthless, and he made a really strong effort to do that. He was also courting Thug Life to come on to Ruthless. So if Eazy had not died of AIDS, many people think that Tupac would have signed with Ruthless when he got out of prison instead of death row. I guess that's possible. He said, quote, I may not seem like a guy you would pick to preach a sermon. This is actually what Eric said at the end, or at least what they prepared that he said. I may not seem like a guy you would pick to preach a sermon, but I feel it is now time to testify, because I do have folks who care about me hearing all kinds of stuff about what's up. Yeah, I was a brother on the streets of Compton doing a lot of things most people look down on, but it did pay off. Then we started rapping about real stuff that shook up the LAPD and the FBI, but we got our message across big time. And everyone in America started paying attention to the boys in the hood. Soon, our anger and hopes got everyone riled up. There were great rewards for me personally, like fancy cars, gorgeous women, and good living, like real nonstop excitement. I'm not religious, but wrong or right, that's me. I'm not saying this because I'm looking for a soft cushion wherever I'm headed. Just feel that I got thousands and thousands of young fans who have to learn about what's real when it comes to AIDS. I would like to turn my own problem into something good that will reach out to all my homeboys and their kin because I want to save their asses before it's too late. I'm not looking for blame. I'm not looking to blame anyone except myself. I've learned in the last week that this thing is real and it doesn't discriminate. It affects everyone. My girl Tamika and I have been together for 4 years and we recently got married. She's good, she's kind, and a wonderful mother. We have a little boy who's a year old. Before Tamika, I had other women. I have 7 children by 6 different women. Maybe success was too good to me. I love all my kids and always took care of them. Now I'm in the biggest fight of my life and it ain't easy. But I want to say much love to those who have been down with me, especially my brothers from N.W.A. And thank you all for your support. Just remember, it's your real time and your real life. I don't know. The Suge Knight thing, out of all the theories, seems to be the most convincing. That dude is a motherfucking menace. I think the Suge Knight thing is the most convincing. I hate to say it. I think you're talking about a boy. I mean, because he was 31. He's pretty young. He was a grown man. But I think you're talking about somebody who had a lot of enemies. And I think even if Suge Knight wasn't involved per se, to say something like that on TV in 2003, like Suge went to jail in 1996, came out, hopped on Jimmy Kimmel for some strange reason, and, was promoted. I think he was promoting Cricket Eye at the time. Hopped on, this interview and said that weird shit. To me, he kind of has a speech impediment anyway, but when I listen to the video, he kind of sounds drunk. And if that's the case, if he was drunk, then it's even more telling. You know what I'm saying? He fucking did this shit. So I don't know. I would love to hear you guys' opinions on it when you listen to this episode, but I know that this will never be solved. And I actually feel pretty bad for the daughter, Ebe, because I believe that she feels like she deserves to be a part of his legacy in a way. And I think it's important to understand that just because you don't get money from someone doesn't mean that you're not a part of their legacy, because she is. When you read books and listen to stuff about Eazy-E, his daughter is a part of that. It's always a part of that conversation. And I know that people are like, oh, she handled the estate and she did this and she did that. And I get it. I don't think that they're ever going to get more money from that estate. I don't know if there's more money to give, but I don't think they're ever really going to get more money from that estate. I think what's going to happen is, unless she talks to her grandmother finally once and for all, in whatever beef they have, and have a true conversation about her father and those last days based on what her grandmother is willing to be honest about. And plus her grandmother is probably old as hell, what she can actually remember. I think she's running out of options. Jerry Heller's dead. Mike Klein can't talk. The grandmother won't talk. The other siblings aren't helping. The state of California won't give you a marriage license. People are not going to reopen this. They're just not. And even though I know that, the FBI was investigating all that type of shit, but all of that gets lost in history, and I think it's important to just try to, instead of seeking money, it's obvious that was your father, and it's obvious through pictures and things like that. I get it. I do get the frustration. I mean, I do get like, oh, no, my child was his child, just like this, but unfortunately that woman, she is the one who got the paper. So she's the one that's in control of the paper. And unfortunately, it puts his children in a weird space. You don't really, I mean, there are 3 kids that you hear about the most. You don't really hear about the other ones. I don't know if it's just because it was like, whatever, ain't no point in fighting this one or what. But I do truly believe that this has run its course. This has run its course. I don't think you're going to get much more information out of anybody about this. And I know she wants Eazy-E's legacy to be that of Tupac and Biggie and Big L, and all these fallen rappers. But Eazy-E's legacy is not one of being a rapper. Eazy-E's legacy is one of being at this point, of being a rapper that died of AIDS, when really he was an entrepreneur and he really did pave the way. Put the vulgarities aside. He really did pave the way for a lot of these hip hop moguls to do what they are doing. And I'm not saying that, you didn't have your, I almost said Russell Crowe, Russell Simmons, and guys like that. But we're talking about on an independent level, to do it in the way he did it in a part of the country where they weren't being taken seriously for things like rap. He built up his legacy for that. Don't try to dismiss that he don't have AIDS, that he didn't have AIDS. Don't try to, muddy the waters with possible conspiracy theories of even Suge Knight. Honestly, you'll never know, unless Suge Knight, while he's in prison right now, decides to write a tell-all book. This is still reliant on somebody who lies. And if in an industry like this where everybody lies, she's probably never really gonna know. And I mean, who knows if Eazy-E really knows how he got it? That shit's like getting COVID and being like, I wonder who I got it from. Yeah, you could have got it at the party. You could have also got it at Target, so it really depends. So I hope I'm not even drunk, and I feel like this is the most incoherent episode I've done. Because it's very stream of consciousness. Because as I'm telling you this story, I'm thinking about so many other things because I've watched so much material on him. And, as I'm reading it, I'm like, oh, but there's this and there's that. So I'm sorry if this was confusing. I hope I hope I made it make sense. But thank you again. This is I Swear to Drunk, I'm Not God. Or this episode is I Swear to God, I'm Not Drunk, because I'm not. But I really hope you come back. Now, you already know this is the last episode of this year. Next year, I'm going to start every other week. I got to. I explained that to you already, so don't make me repeat it. I would love to do them every week, but I'm doing it by myself right now. So until I start, I don't know, maybe one day this will turn into something. I don't know. I don't really care if it does or if it doesn't, but if I ever get to a point where I need help for real, like researching so I can be back weekly, I'll be back weekly and I'll let you know when that happens. Cool. I hope you enjoyed that lavender gimlet, or just the gimlet if you didn't have lavender syrup. I wish I had one, honestly. I may actually do this whole episode and drink anyway. I got to get this heartburn under control first. But I did. I wanted to release it. I'm already late with this episode, but I love y'all. And I really hope you all have had a wonderful Christmas. And I hope you have a happy new year in 2023. New year, probably not new you, but it'll be a new year. So try something different. All right, y'all. Take care. Bye.